Hello, Wunya, Yura, greetings everybody. I acknowledge that we meet today on country that has been cared for by First Nations people since time immemorial. I myself am on Yagara Turrbal country in Meanjin, Brisbane. I acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's enduring connection to land, seas and skies. I pay deep respect to elders past and present, and I also extend that respect to any First Nations people who are joining us today in the Ignite Ideas webinar. Thank you very much for your interest in one of Advanced Queensland's signature programs. My name is Gillian Gardner. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Innovation with Advanced Queensland. Over the last 5 years, Ignite has supported the best and brightest of Queensland's innovators to commercialise new products and services, with more than 380 companies have been funded through this program. Between them, they've received $48 million, and that's created 6,700 jobs for Queenslanders and brought hundreds of new products and services to market, which is what Ignite is all about. I'm sure lots of you will know that the honour roll of past recipients is impressive, including some amazing founders that you'll hear from today. Also, past recipients include superstars like Vold, Grease Boss, and Logan City's very own double unicorn, as of last week, I think, Go One. We're up to round 9 of this super popular program now, and maybe it's your company's turn to join that incredible list. For the first time in round 9, successful applicants will receive more than just funding. We've heard and listened to the feedback we've received about Ignite over the years it's been running, and we are now really keen to make sure that Ignite Ideas recipients have the very best chance that they can of business success. So we've made some little changes to the program. In addition to the grant this time around, successful companies will also be offered business development support in areas like sales and marketing, customer acquisition, scalability, competitor analysis, IP, legal, financial, connections to mentors, champions, sponsors, as well as access and introduction to business and investment networks. This new wraparound support is a pilot for round 9, and we're really excited to see how it goes. Today is about helping you put forward an application that is the very best it can be. You're going to hear from Stephen Lamb, who heads up the Ignite Ideas team here at Advanced Queensland, and we're very grateful some of your peers have agreed to share with us today. You're going to hear true tales and top tips from founders Jason Atkins of Cake Equity, Yasmin Grigalunas from World's Biggest Garage Sale, and Nairi McKenzie, the co-founder of BidHive. Now, Jason, Yasmin and Nairi all applied to Ignite more than once before they cracked it and were successful, so I'm sure they're going to have some great learnings to share with you all today. We know that you might have some particular questions. Please pop those into the chat as the webinar progresses, and we'll answer as many of those as we can after we've heard from our presenters. Alrighty, let's get started. Jason from Cake Equity, over to you to kick us off this morning. What's your Ignite story?
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason from Cake. Cake helps startups with equity management. Our focus is working on seed to Series A startups and growing with our customers, especially when the startups have global teams. As Cake can help manage equity plans in over 30 countries now. Cake has the legal agreements built in, which makes working with equity better than ever, especially cross-border. So this is not where we were, when we first applied for Ignite. We've come a long way in that time. And I'm going to share a little bit with you about our application process and how it's been, working with it. We just finished our 3rd report, so we're all done now, which is great because we can apply again now for Tier 2, which we're planning on doing. So with our application, we were applying to launch our product in Sydney and in regional Queensland. So we had some success in Brisbane, but we were still very, very early on, but we had some traction. And our application was about launching us down into Sydney particularly. It is a lot of work. You do really have to dig into the application process, but you do learn a lot, and it helps with strategy and planning. So it should probably be seen as an investment because there's quite a lot of thinking that needs to go into a good business plan, and certainly this application process makes you do that thinking. From my perspective, I felt like the application process and the judges were very particular with risk management. It's not something that we'd done it, but we're a startup. And so we really had to spend more time on that than we ever had before. Obviously thinking about only including eligible activities. So we had an advisor help us. I had done, I guess, I think we did 5 applications by the time we were successful. And it's just not that easy. One was with a different company, I must say, but I think that having some traction helped us when we were successful, and I think that speaks to risk management. So just having more research done, more market feedback, customers, partners, things like that, just helped us to answer the questions with more confidence and more depth, which I think helped our application to be successful when we got it. Each section does have a range of items that you need to include, and you need to be very careful to include as many of those as possible in each question. I'm a good writer, and I've done a lot of pitching, and I've won a lot of deals, but I'm not a good grant writer, and so I just accepted that, and we got an advisor to help us with the grant writing, because it's a very particular skill. Some people are very good at it. I was seeing other startups get multiple grants, and obviously, it's such a huge advantage for very early stage companies when funding's so hard to come by. So, so we ended up getting a grant writer. She was amazing. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say who it is, but if someone gives me the go ahead, I'll definitely pass their details on to everyone. She was amazing. So we included a slide deck in our application, which was quite thorough and sort of really gave a lot more additional information. We also did a video pitch, which our advisor suggested was a really good idea. I would highly recommend doing that. So as I say, with the decision makers, what I felt like they were looking for is the ability to use the funds wisely. As I said, it seemed that our application was better received once we had some initial traction, which I think talks to the risk management further. And it is a competitive process, so I think that makes sense as well. I think the ability to build a real company that can have an impact in the Queensland economy was important. I think when we were very, very early on, even though we were really confident in what we were doing, we just hadn't proven enough things, to win a competitive grant and also show that we could really grow a successful company and have an impact on the economy. I also feel like the level of innovation was important. Obviously these are just our experiences, so I don't know exactly what is important because, the decision makers, do their thing. But I felt that going through and answering the questions and the way our advisor was helping us, that we really did need to stress how much innovation we were bringing to market, because then that would talk to our ability to build a sustainable competitive advantage and therefore leverage the funding strongly again into a successful company that can compete nationally and internationally. So so just some final tips, I guess, before my time's up. I did apply several times just because the quantity of money is so significant and its ability to kick a very early stage company along is very meaningful. Persevere. We really did persevere. It does take a lot of effort. I talked about that. If you've had feedback before, do take that into consideration the next time. I felt like the feedback was meaningful. But the number one thing that helped us, honestly, was getting a really good grant writer. I think there are good grant writers and bad grant writers. I think that was probably besides the fact that I guess Cake had become more successful, as well as having a really good grant writer. Those are probably the two biggest takeaways I'd like to share. And just finally, the reporting process was really good. So you have to report about halfway, and then you have to report halfway and then report at the end. And the reporting process was good. It was clear. We did what we said we were going to do, so we didn't have any issues with that. So we were able to get our funding all the way along, and the process was well run. So that's it from me. Hopefully that's helpful. And now I'm passing over to Yaz from World's Biggest Garage Sale, who's a champion, who's going to give her experience as well.
Thanks, Jason. And I am a proud Cake user for our business. So
thank you.
To you. Look, I, much like Jason, very similar story. I think round 4, 5, and 7 were when we applied and were unsuccessful 3 times. And it was almost a roll of the eyes from my team, like, are we ever going to get this? So I'm going to be more about the perseverance and the learnings along the way, you know, fail and fail and fail and fail again. And don't see it as a failure. It's actually all part of your learning process. And so for us, and for me in particular, applying so early on when probably the business was, in hindsight, not really ready, the opportunity to grow and to learn and to understand the native language of grants was really helpful. And it actually helped us refine our pitch, refine our stories, and even define the business and its evolution as we were trying to take founder speak and energy and excitement and capability and turning it into government articulated content. So much like Jason, I engaged at this last round. So we were successful in round 8. So we are in our current round. So we're executing on the project as we speak. But I decided that this time around we would get a consultant in or someone who could actually be our interpreter. And what was really exciting and interesting about that opportunity is that really even the active time, like it still took many hours, like multiple weeks of my time to really have these conversations with our interpreter, let me call her, and for her to then assist and help articulate that language of a founder into really challenging me to think differently and to think in the hypothesis and in the future state of what this project would be. And of course, as a founder, you go big, you talk about your business, you're extremely excited and proud about it, everything you do, the breadth and the brilliance. And what this grant application, or all the times we did it, really helped me do is to focus on a project, a specific deliverable, a specific thing, the one thing that we would be able to do that would then deliver scale, deliver jobs, and deliver on the project outcomes. And so I feel like what our business was able to do throughout the number of years that we've really kind of poked our head into Ignite and not always been successful is the network. Like your network is your net worth. Meeting with the Advanced Queensland team, going and tapping into the multiple projects, asking the questions and taking all that information in, which really helped articulate and refine how we would deliver a project, design a project, and really then take it to regions. Like for us, we're passionate about regions as well, and taking our business into its evolution. And I mean, World's Biggest Garage Sale started 5 years ago. A year after that, I created a sub-brand called Seconomy, and you'll start to see Seconomy come to life over the next period of time. But thinking that big and in advance and being able to kind of take the reader and you know on the journey without making it so confusing. Like we don't need to tell everything and everyone in the grant application. Being very refined and defined was really important for us. I think if I could do it all again, I would apply 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And like Jason, we have our a future state of, you know, if Ignite can continue, we'll love to come back and do more like others have done. They've come in at the first grant, been successful, delivered, and then come in again at the second grant opportunity, the higher grant value. You know, thinking big, but acting small and really making sure that you get your metrics, your network, your refined, I suppose, systemic definition of what you're going to deliver. It's very, very deep. You can't just slap this together. It does take a lot of time, and just be prepared that it's going to take a lot of time in advance. It's worth the time, even if you don't succeed. And I think 96% of us don't succeed each round. And that's okay too, because it steps you up for the next grant. Maybe this one and maybe a different grant, but it definitely steps you up. Money and metrics matter. I'm going to wrap up with this. Money and metrics matter. Grants help, and we all think we need money. We all think we need grants, but bigger than grants, we need income, revenue. That's really what this is about. And grants are not there to save your business. I mean, certainly in some cases they do. They buy you time. They help you then scale. But more than money and metrics that matter in programs like this, as someone that's failed 3 times before being successful, the mind and the moments matter just as much. So don't dismiss that along the way, that the people you get to speak to, whether you go and get someone to help you write your grant, you talk to other founders like this. I know I speak on behalf of all founders, in particular Jason and Nairi on the line today. We will answer questions and share experiences, and we are here to help share our experiences. And Nairi was one of the founders I rang to say, hey, Nairi, I really want to know how I can be better at this grant thing. And so draw on us founders. Your network is your net worth. Draw on the founders, draw on the ones who have failed, draw on the ones who have sailed and who are absolutely killing it, double unicorn with Vu and his team, and also draw on the Advanced Queensland team. There is so much untapped talent in that team, and don't go in asking for money. Think about the advice and their lessons, their learnings and their perspectives, because they will help you evolve your story, your pitch and your project so that you will eventually become a successful Ignite Ideas grant recipient too. Persevere, be resilient. They're all great things we founders have as qualities naturally. Oh, and I'm going to hand over to Nairi now, the absolute triple threat. She is going to tell her story, and I'm just in awe of her as a founder, and I can't wait to hear her story more today as well. Thanks, Nairi.
Oh, thank you, Yaz. Hi, everyone. So I'm Nairi McKenzie, CEO and co-founder of BitHide. We've built a SaaS platform that helps organisations plan, manage and track their contract or procurement bidding activity all in one place. And we're trying to tackle the problem of inequality with procurement. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it sucks the marrow out of everybody in the company. And so we're trying to educate and give people the capability and the capacity for them to win government contracts a lot more affordably and to make it easier and more accessible to them. So to give you a bit of background, I have received 3 Ignite grants. Different to Yaz and Jason's story, I have actually handled the applications personally, and you know, I was not successful in, so I got the round 1 or the tier 1 a lot easier than the tier 2. I had to have a couple of cracks to get the tier 2. So I suppose to reiterate Jason's point, I treat grant applications as if it was my business plan or my operational plan. You need to be able to articulate very clearly, you know, what's going to move the dial on your business? What are the key milestones you need to achieve to get from here to here? And then how are you going to execute that to make an impact? And as founders, you know, we're used to doing the hustle. We're used to tapping into the pain points or the hot buttons of our customers. And we just need to make a bit of a mind shift when we're pitching to the government, because the government may not ultimately be an end user of our product, but they do have the pain point, and that is they thrive or they have to rely on industry to help them execute on their policies. And so if you can really understand what are the government's key priorities and talk to those priorities. So if you, if you're a manufacturing organisation, you know, how is your project going to create jobs and sustain manufacturing industry in Queensland? You know, if you have an environmental or sustainability product, how are you supporting the sustainable development goals? What is your organisation going to do to support the government advance its policies and priorities around environment and sustainability? So, and jobs creations and regional growth. So that would be my main feedback is, don't get into the weeds about how wonderful your product is. Elevate your pitch to be how wonderful your business is and how it will support the Queensland government and the broader economy advance. And so that was one of my biggest learnings out of it. Things like being able to protect your IP, know your competitive landscape. That's really important to come through as well. You know, what makes your particular product or service unique or novel or innovative. And I guess, you know, when you're coming to define what your project is, your project probably needs to be commensurate with your level of maturity and how you want to commercialise. So my first application was, I was going to run a commercial pilot, and that, for a baby company, that's appropriate. The next level, next stage application, I took it to the next level, and I was going to do an international launch and break into a more global market. And then the third stage, which is now my tier 2 application, which I'm now currently executing on, is developing a sales channel and partnership model. And so you can see the evolution of the company and how I'm trying to move the dial in terms of commercialization and scalability through that application process. So I think that's probably my 5 minutes worth. And so I'll hand it over now to Stephen. And again, I'm happy to take any questions afterwards.
Thanks, Nairi. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the director of the Ignite team that delivers the program. So I thought I might just touch on a general overview of Ignite and then a few tips and tricks and advice. So the main thing to realise with Ignite Ideas is it's a commercialisation grant. Its purpose is to support businesses in taking products and services to market over the duration of the grant. It is not a business startup grant, and it is not a research and development grant. So you must have a fairly advanced product or service to apply and be competitive under this program. Because the program is so successful and attractive to people, we've implemented a 2-stage process for the applications. First stage being the EOIs, which you would all be interested in submitting now. And then for those that are shortlisted, we then ask for a more detailed full application. The program is very competitive. You should be aware of that. We expect to receive in excess of 500 applications to the funding round, potentially up as far as 700. From those applications, we will most likely only shortlist 20% of applicants to then submit a full application. And overall, the success rate in getting funding is only about 5%. So based on those stats, it is very important that you present, obviously, your best possible business proposal. Do not assume that you have a great product or service and will clearly get through. You need to submit a compelling application to increase your chances. So today we're basically talking about the first stage, the submission of an EOI, so I'll focus on that. The EOI is just a short application. It's only about 10 to 12 questions. It shouldn't take you too long to complete that, and I would recommend that you don't require grant writers for the EOI stage, but you could consider that if you get through to the full application where it's much more involved. The EOI questions are ones that the assessors consider the most important to them in deciding if you meet the intent of the program and whether they obviously then wish to hear more about your proposal in a more detailed application. So a few suggestions from me in completing your EOI. At a minimum, make sure you answer the questions that are asked. The questions that are asked that way for a reason. We read a lot of applications where applicants don't actually answer the question. They tell us what they want to tell us instead of what we want to hear. So my strong recommendation is once you finish completing your EOI, go back and reread your response and then read the question again and see if your response actually answers the questions we've asked. It's really important because you only have a short period in which to answer those questions. It's generally around 150 words. Use those words wisely to respond specifically to the question. The second thing is, which some of our previous recipients have touched on, clearly explain what's innovative, new and unique about your product and service. So what gives you a competitive edge over your competitors? The assessors are really interested in finding that out. If you don't have a competitive edge, you are unlikely to be shortlisted. Ensure your product is at MVP. If it is not at MVP, you will not proceed either. So ask yourself these questions. Is it at the point where it's developed beyond a prototype? Has development work been completed? Have you tested it with a sample of potential customers? And would customers be prepared to pay for it in its current form? You should be able to answer yes to each of those questions. If you can't, you will struggle to be successful under this grant. Third thing, be clear on what your commercialisation plan is. And by that, we mean what activities do you intend to undertake to increase your customer numbers, increase your sales, and secure market share. If you include activities that are around product development, again, you will not be successful because this is a commercialisation grant. It's about what activities you will be undertaking to take your product to market. And also ensure your budget includes only eligible expenditure items. So the guidelines provide fairly clear guidance on what is eligible and what is not. The FAQs also touch on that subject. So I highly recommend you review those closely when you're putting together your budget submission. Just the last thing I touch on is the assessment process. So I think it's important for people to know that government officers do not review or determine these grants. We do contract a pool of independent assessors. The assessors cover a range of industries and sectors, and they're experienced business people who have started businesses and taken products and services to market themselves. So they've got a very good understanding of what's required to commercialise a product or a service, and they'll be looking for those type of aspects in your application. So give a bit of thought into how you construct your application. Read the guidelines and FAQs closely, comply with all the rules as best you can, but the EOI is your opportunity to submit your best pitch on your product and service and why the government should invest in you in taking it to market. So that's all I was going to touch on, because I think we should provide some time to respond to your questions, which I think Gillian is going to take charge of. Over to you, Gigi.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and all our panellists today. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your story and give some tips and tricks to these lovely folk on the line. Just a couple of, I think we've been tracking the questions in the chat, and I think a number of them have gone on to be addressed. So I'm going to leave some of them because I think they've been answered by Stephen or by others. In relation to grant writers, we obviously can't recommend anyone to you as a grant writer, but as Yaz said, your network is your net worth, so reach out and ask each other.
Sorry to bother you again. I think during the course of our conversation around Lorica before...
Somebody doesn't have mute on. Maybe we'll get our tech person here to mute out somebody's business call.
All right, I muted him.
But I noticed that a couple of people have already popped their names into the chat. And, you know, there's your give first mentality that we love founders for. People are already offering to assist each other. So, and someone's already posted the name of someone who I'm presuming is a grant writer. So feel free to ask your friends and colleagues and Google it and all the rest and find yourself a grant writer if that's something that you want to pursue. I would stress or re-emphasise what Stephen said about perhaps leaving it to the full application stage, that you mightn't want to invest in something like that for your EOI, which hopefully we've made straightforward enough for you to do on your own, or with, you know, a third party, a friend, a trusted colleague that can have a look at it for you and give you some feedback. Stephen spoke about the assessors. I think that's a really key point. A couple of people are keen to know too that they are those industry experts. It's not a bureaucrat that's assessing. Heaven forbid put me reading your applications. I wouldn't have a clue in terms of what would get to market successfully and not. So we do leave that to the experts. Shafali and Ryan's questions, I think there are a couple of the ones that may have been covered by Stephen. around whether your projects might be ready to, at the right stage to apply for Ignite grant. Now, I'm probably not going to pronounce this properly. Is it Giacchino? You've asked about match funding for tier 1 or 2. Do you have to have the cash in bank at the start, or can you show that you will have funds progressively throughout the grant period? Guess who's going to get to answer that one? Mr. Lamb, Stephen?
So in regards to the matching cash, you basically have to provide evidence that you've provided your share of the matching cash as the project progresses. So the way the grant typically works is we will pay you a percentage of it up front. It's generally 50%. So if it's a $100,000 grant, we'll pay you $50,000 up front. At the halfway mark, you need to show that you have spent that $50,000 as well as your share of the matching funds. So if you had to put in 20%, you'd have to show that you've spent $10,000 of your own money as well. If it was a tier 2 where you've got to match 100%, you'd have to show that you've spent out $50,000 and an additional $50,000 of your own. And if you've done that, that then triggers the next payment, and the same thing will happen 6 months after that. So you don't need to have the money in the bank up front, but you definitely need to have it to co-fund your project as it progresses.
Thanks, Stephen. And while you've got your mute button off, there's another one around conflicts of interest for the assessors, given they are from industry. Can you touch on how we manage that?
Yeah, so I also should have said earlier that all the applications are assessed by at least 2 assessors, and the assessment forms that they complete has a conflict of interest declaration in it. So if they do happen to have a conflict with your particular business or product or service, they declare that conflict up front, and then your application is allocated to another assessor. So only assessors with non-conflicts will review your application.
Thank you, Stephen. There was an earlier question around, and you have already responded in the chat to Jason, thank you. But Yaz, I wondered if you might have something to add to it. It was about how you survived. If it took you that many goes to try and get this grant, how did you sort of survive in the meantime? And Jason, you talked about bootstrapping and some other smaller raises that you did. Yaz, I wondered if you might want to comment on how you kept your business going.
Yeah, I just actually did type that in, but I'll repeat it so that it can be shared. Yeah, absolutely. I went through an accelerator, so that helped with some investment. And I mean, that the money and runway often runs out. And I'm actually in Cairns at the Innovation Festival as we speak. And every founder that's been on stage sharing their story up here often talks about the runway running out, being backed into a corner, pretty much not knowing how to feed your family and survive or thrive. And much like Jason, you know, we were bootstrapped. We had a couple of small grants along the way, but we do generate revenue. I came into an accelerator already with revenue. It wasn't certainly enough to survive and build a team, but we were able to really, again, the network is my net worth. I was able to draw upon businesses and services to minimize cash spend through pro bono and low bono services and offerings. And I say that all the time, pro bono, low bono, and commercial, of course. But most people, if you ask, are there to help. And if you can slow your runway down, not just necessarily by going out to try and find grants, because they are extremely intensive in terms of your time, there are other ways to be able to stretch your runway other than looking for grants, because grants it's very, very hard work. And I don't want to dismiss the effort that goes into grants, but I also don't want to dismiss the importance. So we were fortunate along the way to get a couple of other grants, but we did a small capital raise that helped us. And we just recently closed a $4 million round, which was quite intensive and immense in itself. But it's a really, I want to encourage founders out there who are on the line right now, that when it's really hard and when it's really tough, grants are not your only option. So just draw on us, because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all the founders and people that helped me along the way, regardless of the money. Thank you,
Yaz. There's a question in there from Alex around services versus products and eligibility. It's Alex has the impression the focus has been on products today, but services can also be brought to market and are eligible to be supported. Is that correct, Stephen?
Yeah, that's right. We've funded a lot of services in the past. It's definitely not just product focused. So yeah, I'd encourage you to submit your proposal around your service and we'll see how you go against everything else that we receive. Yes, definitely considered.
Thank you. And there's a follow-on question there about equipment. Are equipment purchases eligible for funding under Ignite?
So with all the eligible expenditure, it has to be specific to the commercialisation of your product. So if you need to buy a specific piece of equipment that is specifically required to commercialise, take it to market, yes, it's covered, but it is only covered up to, I think it's $10,000. Yeah, so you can claim up to $10,000 for equipment, but again, it's got to be specific to commercialising your product or service.
Thanks, Stephen. And Mr. or Ms. Watt has asked if you could clarify the condition regarding a business already being in the market, not being likely to succeed.
So this one sort of comes down to a case-by-case situation. It depends on how big the market is that you're targeting and maybe how big your current market share is. So obviously, if you're in a market where you're targeting, say, only the 10 biggest mining companies in Queensland, and you already have 2 of them as your customers, I think it's reasonable to say that you are already in the market if you have a 20% market share. But if you're in a market where you're selling a product to hundreds of thousands of people and you currently have 50 customers, it's probably reasonable to assume that you are not yet in the market because you don't have much market share. So that's the way I would look at it, and I think that's the way the assessors consider it as well.
Thanks very much, Stephen. We're coming to the end of our allotted time. I know there's a number of other questions there that we haven't gotten to, but we've posted the contact details for the team in the chat. Please make sure you get in and have a really good read of the guidelines. And there's also some frequently asked questions and answers to those posted on our website too. Make sure you've had a read through those before you call the team, because, you know, they're a tiny team and we are expecting a bit of a wave of emails after this webinar, which is great and we welcome them. But just in terms of getting back to you all, it's really helpful if you're not asking us things that we've already answered in those facts. So have a look at those. Yaz, Nairi, Jason, thank you so much for giving up your precious time to share with these folk today. We really appreciate your insights and your generosity in sharing your story and experience in relation to Ignite. I think takeaways I heard from all 3 of you were around perseverance, stick at it, effort, resilience, don't give up, fail, fail, fail again. Yaz, you said it a couple of times, but your network is your net worth. The value of that objective third party to have a read of your stuff, look it over, ask you the tough questions. Remember that the assessors are probably reading about your product or service for the first time, and you know it inside out and back to front and upside down and roundabout, and they don't. So you need to explain it really clearly for them. And there's nothing like, you know, reading it to your mum or your dad or your cousin, you know, as well as your informed and expert colleagues, to make sure that it's nice and clear and easy to understand. Grant writers, they can help, but you don't always need them. Check in the chat there for those couple of names. And finally, I think the one around time and making sure that you give yourself enough time to put your absolute best foot forward. This isn't something that you can do like me, your economics assignment the night before. You won't get that 7 if you do that. Trust me, I know from experience this is a bit the same. So make sure you plan and give yourself enough time to really put in your best application. We'll also pop all the relevant links that we've mentioned here today into the chat, and I believe the recording will be available for folk if you want to watch it again or share it with friends and other people that couldn't be with us today. That's all going into the chat now, I believe, as we speak. So thanks very much, everyone. To those of you lucky enough to be up in Cairns, enjoy the rest of the festival, and the rest of you, good luck with your Ignite application.
Do we have time? Sorry, do we have time for one question? One quick question?
Who's that?
Steve Prasser.
Okay, Steve, really quickly, we might have a minute.
Okay, very quickly. I just wondering about alignment with Queensland's priority industries, because it's quite a limited range there, and they're not really sustainably targeted. There's more focus on mining than sustainability, ironically. But if you have a product, I won't talk about our product, but an example I'll give is, I don't know if you're familiar with quad lock phone cases. I'm going to use them as an example. This product was developed in Melbourne by a couple of guys about 10 years ago. It's just to hold your phone on the handlebars of your bike. That's become a $100 million a year business. That product, though, if it was being pitched today, would not align with any of Queensland's priority industries. So I'm just wondering how you do that. If we've got a product, it's made from sustainable materials, it will be sold online globally, and it is in that sports and recreation space, but I just don't see an alignment there, even though the market potentially is very large, and we've tested that market. I'm struggling to make that connection.
Yeah, I hear you, Stephen. I think it's probably worth you having a one-on-one conversation with one of us. So we'll make contact with you after this. But in general terms, I think we aren't, the priority industries and government objectives are obviously really key to our investment. We're investing, or we aren't, but taxpayers' money is being invested. And we, have a mandate that a government was elected on that we need to be delivering against. So those are really important, and your work needs to be relevant to the priorities that the government has stated. But that's not to say that you should feel restricted by a list of, 7 or 8 industry priorities that you need to squeeze your product or service into. If you're feeling like that, this might not be the program for you, is probably the first thing I should say. But secondly, I think it's always worth a conversation on something like that with one of us around what you're doing and talking in a bit more detail about it, and how there may be relevance to government priorities or industries that you aren't able to see. We're happy to talk you through that and provide some assistance in terms of where the connections might be. I don't know, Stephen, if you wanted to add anything further to that.
No, that's fine. If we, rather than hold everybody up, if we could have a chat about that, or I can send you a bit of an overview of the product. But I think there are a lot of industries out there that have huge market potential, a lot of products and services that don't fit in that fairly limited scope of priority industries.
Sure.
Can I just touch on that quickly? So the priority industries, that's only one small component. The thing to remember about the Ignite grant is its focus is all about strengthening key industries in Queensland, diversifying the economy, creating new jobs, breaking into global markets. If you have a product that can touch on all those things, that will most likely outweigh whether you're in a priority sector or not. This program is largely about jobs creation down the track. They're making businesses successful, so they grow to a size where they're then employing more Queenslanders.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And I would throw in there, because, a founder is always looking for opportunities. Stephen, I don't know your product, but resource recovery, advanced manufacturing, circular economy. Are you making your product with resource recovered materials? I would challenge you to think about maybe your product could fit into the priorities by considering what the priorities are and further developing the items that you're looking to sell globally. And for me, I'm already interested thinking, oh my gosh, advanced manufacturing in a Queensland state from if you're selling a product that's actually an asset. Not everything needs to be technology and software as a service. So there's huge opportunities there to align to the priorities. Happy to.
I see that alignment. We are using all sustainable materials, but and we would like to bring our manufacturing capability in country when we scale up. But at the moment, Australia just doesn't have the manufacturing industry for our product.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Yes. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you joining us today. Good luck. See you soon.